Autumn Skye is a prolific visionary artist, and she's one of the artists that is a part of my work in Our Right Minds. Her profound images appear in my award-winning film, as well as the new book, In Our Right Minds. It is an honor to be able to present her work and to present her here on the Dale Allen Podcast. Autumn Skye lives, breathes, and dreams art, and has done so since she was old enough to hold a pencil and reach for a piece of paper. Autumn Skye exhibits and teaches worldwide, and otherwise thrives and paints in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. I can tell you that I am deeply inspired by Autumn Skye, and I know you will be too. In other news, I am, of course, busy with the book and its promotion. And if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to head on over to Amazon and support the work by buying a book. You'll see some terrific reviews there. Consider bringing it into your book club or starting a book club around the book. This book has a tendency to inspire very juicy discussion. Additionally, film screenings are really happening at different parts across the country. Those are really fun community-building events. You show In Our Right Minds, bring a community of people together, have a very vibrant discussion afterwards, and I'm happy to either come to that discussion live or via Zoom. These film screenings are really fun. We had one locally here, and it was sumptuous. So you can reach out to me at inourrightminds.net to find out how to host a film screening in your area. And now, my interview with Autumn Skye. It is an exciting honor, really, to be sitting with you this way, Autumn, because I am such a fan of your prolific work. I'm in awe and amazement because each one of your paintings is a portal. Each one is just completely masterful. And I just don't know how you do it because then there's another and another and another. Have you always known that you were an artist? Did you grow up in an artistic family? Where did this come from?
Well, definitely the where does it come from is to me unnameable. And I don't need to try to find the origins of that other than just getting clear in my heart and my body and allowing whatever needs to come through while simultaneously showing up every day. You say, where do all these paintings, like how do I create so much work or be so prolific? And honestly, it's a huge dedication of time and diligence. So my laundry pile might argue that I could spend my time elsewhere, but the paintings really call to me, and time becomes really fluid when I'm in my studio. I don't really notice if many hours go by. It's just such a beautiful meditation to see these paintings come into being. And it's been something that's been my focus my whole life. Since I was old enough to hold a pencil, I was making pictures, and it was always my my joy and my friend and my interface with the world. So even when traveling and road trips or being at school, there was always a way that I would turn those experiences into some sort of art project, sculpting in the sand or turning my academic high school projects into large art projects instead of writing long essays. There was just always something that called to me out of the visual arts.
That's a wonderful story you just told about being in school and turning an essay project into more of an art project. Did most of your teachers support that to say, okay, well, we will accept this pathway in your expression of your learning?
I think that they were probably thrilled to not have to mark one more 3,000 word essay. Instead, I would, one example is instead of writing an essay on the Egyptian pyramids or the Egyptian culture in grade 11, I think, I sculpted a life-size bust out of clay of King Tut. And so that actually hung on my teacher's wall for another 25 years until he retired just recently. So it's really, yeah, there was always encouragement by my teachers, and my high school art teacher was very supportive as well, and just would encourage me to push the limits of my capabilities and explore new mediums. And he just set my grade at 98.5% and said, "Do whatever you want," because he knew that I would do a lot more that way. So, and my family has always been supportive too. So it's sort of been an understanding in my life. And I'm very, very blessed to say I've never been told not to make art, which is such a common experience for people, especially in childhood. In some way or another, people are told, even if they love to make art as a child, as they mature into adolescence and then especially into teens, people are told to get a real job or put their time into something more important or um, more financially viable, or that they're not good enough. There's comparison. There's just so many reasons and stories that people step away from their creativity. And so I'm thrilled and grateful and deeply honored and privileged to say that I was never one of those people. So I just have made art unabashedly my whole life.
Well, there's a lot of really good teachers out there. And I think that's inspiring what you just told us, that the teachers along your pathway were some of the finest who were able to recognize the different kinds of intelligence in the world and to encourage it. Where do you live?
I'm on the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia. So it's
Okay.
beautiful temperate rainforests and ocean, gorgeous, clear air and beautiful water. And yeah, I'm very grateful. And that really nourishes and nurtures my creative flow as well. Just being embedded in the trees, close to the ocean, really, I feel really infuses into the art space.
I think so too, because your work really brings forth nature and winds it in and is such a palpable part of, I think, every piece. Somehow there's nature in there and a sense of the organic. So you went to school, you got through that, and then you've just been making art all of your life, just all the
Yep,
way through.
I've definitely dabbled in other things. I waitressed for 12 years and had a cafe for 3.5 years and have produced events and done various things and continue to do other community outreach and sort of community gathering endeavors. But yes, the art has been my constant.
Was your art in your cafe?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that taught me a lot. Yeah, running a restaurant and that we were open 7 days a week and I was there, I was just constantly interfacing with the public and hanging the work and creating group shows and it really, yeah, it taught me a lot.
Wow, that's great. Must have been an absolutely beautiful place. Do you paint every day?
No, that would be my ideal, but there's, being a painter is one thing, and being a small business owner is another. So you have to really find balance between answering emails and interacting with people who want a license or um, actually like framing or delivering the work. Social media is a whole other ball game. There's a lot of different ways that we have to spend our time as an artist who lives off their work. But I like to get at least do something creative a day, and even if it's making a beautiful meal, that to me it's the same energy. It's just a different outlet.
Mhm.
So, um, I'd say I don't do well with routine. Is sort of an understatement. I don't adhere to it. I haven't actually tried that much, because I just really trust the compass of my heart and my attention to take me to what is next. And so, yeah, sometimes I'll paint for 12 hours or 15 hours in a day if I all of a sudden have this spaciousness. And otherwise, it might be 3 or 5 hours. And then sometimes I don't paint for a week or two if I need to do other things or if I'm traveling or if I'm teaching, I am painting, but it's a different kind of painting.
I'm just in awe of you. I really am.
Hmm.
For me personally, I am deeply privileged that your work appears in my film and in my book. I mean, that's a privilege and an honor.
Hmm.
And one of them, in fact, the maiden, she's in the chapter in my book. That's the maiden, and it's the beautiful girl with the blonde hair and the lion. You know
Mm.
what's wild about that? In my book, there's also a picture of my daughter who happens to be looking in that three-quarter view as well with her blonde hair, and she's a Leo.
Oh,
And
cool.
that picture, it's so in alignment with my daughter when she
Hmm.
was that age. She's 23 now. Are most of your paintings, they're decent sized canvases, like I'm seeing behind you, that's a good size canvas. Is that your typical size work?
That's actually pretty small. This is a print on canvas. The original was about 4 times the size. I'd say my average size is probably 30 by 40 inches or between 2 and 4 feet wide or high. So
Oh,
I like that size. It's also nice. I do a lot of sort of the size that you see here would be, I guess, a 12 or a 16 by 20. And that's a really nice, comfortable size, especially if I'm traveling. It slips into my suitcase. But in general, yeah, I like to work a little bit bigger. It just feels like I really feel like paintings are mirrors. And so when the viewer can stand in front of a piece and it has enough realism to be believable, we can really inhabit the space of that painting and really like experience the energy and the symbolism of that painting in a very somatic and personal way. And so I find that with the bigger paintings, it just creates a little bit more accessible of an entry point.
that's brilliantly stated because as I think about it, when I look at your work, it is like a mirror and it draws you in. It's hypnotic. It's just mesmerizing because when the character in the painting is looking at me, to your point, there's a lot of realism in that face, which makes it come very alive. But what's so beautiful about it is that every one of those faces is a portal, is channeling something. It's like a vortex just bringing through his or her wisdom.
Mhm.
Mostly a lot of women, and the world needs more and just plenty of beautiful, empowering, whole, healthy images of the female. I also love that you have in your collection of abundant works beautiful images of men too. And in those images, there's always a sense of a beautiful kind of balance. So in those images, I feel always the heart that comes through, the kindness. It's these kinds of strengths because there's so much strength in an open heart. There's so much presence in that. So that comes through in all of your channeled persons that you paint. I paint too, so I get a lot of joy out of painting. But for me, obviously, at a much smaller scale, I do know what it's like to have the hours go by, which is a very right brain experience. It means you're in the flow. And there is a timelessness when you're in that creative mode that all of us need to spend some spaciousness in, whether it's making a meal, painting, composing, making music, but something or just communing with nature, something that puts us into that flow spirit. But I know I start with a blank canvas, but tell me about your process. I'm just fascinated.
Well, sometimes the paintings appear in my mind's eye or in my imagination clear. Just I know exactly what the composition is going to be. Maybe there's some nuances or colors that I'm not totally clear on, but just the pose or the symbolism, the other elements that are in the painting is clear. And then other times it's just the beginnings. It's just maybe a figure, or it's an animal, or it's a color, or it's a mood, um, and and then it takes me on a journey. And regardless of how sort of complete that concept is when I begin, there's always mystery along the way. And so much of the creative practice in any practice um, is this balance of left brain, right brain, right? The it's the showing up, it's the sitting down, it's the meditation, it's the diligence, and it's the getting out of the way. It's the listening and receiving and paying attention in a very unattached way. So they go on their on their journey, and sometimes there's mysteries that take quite a while to resolve. And the painting will just sit there, and I'll work on other things or other aspects of the work. What I often say to my students is work on what you do know. So don't sit there and agonize over what should be in the hands or what should the background be. Don't weigh pros and cons. Just work on what you do know, and then the rest will come clear in perfect time. And so often those other elements that that we're waiting to have answers for, actually we need to work on other things first anyways. If we're trying to figure out what's in the hands, maybe we actually need to work on the background, the foundation of that. So it's really about like the metaphor of start at the foundation and build your way up, and just trust that heart compass to guide you in the perfect time. And sometimes those elements can be surprising. Sometimes the whispering of the muse or of inspiration of what needs to come next in a painting can be very scary. It can be risky. It can mean undoing work that you've spent a lot of time. It can be embarking on some new element of the painting that's going to take a lot of time, or that we don't know if we have the tools to work to do. But that's how we grow as artists. That's by painting things we don't know how to paint, by pushing ourselves beyond what we think we're capable of. This is where the magic happens. And really, when listening on a deep level to inspiration, to our bodies, what feels right as we're working, even if it feels risky or it doesn't make sense logically, that is, to me, when the painting really will move people. There's an authenticity that people respond to. And I think that that's, it could impress them with its skill, right? You could stand in front of a painting and say, that is a very impressive painting. And that's because you worked really hard at it. That's because you showed up hour after hour, day after day, decade after decade, honing your skill and really put in the time. But if it moves you, that means that you were successful in listening and trusting and getting out of the way. And so it's very much that dance, that in breath, out breath, masculine, feminine.
As I listen to you, Autumn, it's like a metaphor for life itself. How do we construct our lives? How do we paint our lives? And how oftentimes do we think we're going to head in one direction and realize that if the intuitive messaging, if the internal compass says something different, we might have to undo what we were doing or the path that we were on in order to allow a pivot, a shift in what we're doing. Holding the space for the not knowing. You said, oh, what to paint in the hands? Well, you don't know yet because it's not there yet. So work on what you know. And that's such a metaphor for life as well. Just there are times when we need to be in the void. That's one of the things I talk about in my work as well, is trusting the void. We live in a culture that really isn't about trusting the void. It's always about, what are you doing? Show me what you're doing. Show me what you're doing. It's not typical for us in our culture to say, oh, I'm in a space of void right now. I'm taking a pause to receive intuitive guidance. We don't speak that way. I think our Indigenous brothers and sisters do. I think that our foremothers and forefathers did. And I think that there are some structures in our culture that allow for that kind of speaking, but it's such a critical part of life. The pause, the void, the waiting to see, what drops in. The other thing I'm so appreciating as I listen to you is this right-left brain balance. We are designed to be in a beautiful balance of left and right brain. And while both sides of our brains are at work on every task, the left and right brain are working on every task. Both sides are at work, but it's the way we attend to the world. Are we attending to the world through the right hemisphere or the left hemisphere? Where is our attention? And many of us in our modern cultures, we spend a lot of time attending to the world from our left hemisphere. It's the discourse of our society. It's the planning. It's the structuring. It's the analytical. It's the representative. And it's a brilliant. It's a really important part of our humanity. But without that right hemisphere, that present, embodied, poetic, metaphoric, empathetic, and deep relation to the other, we need to spend plenty of time attending to the world from that hemisphere. That's our wisdom. Your work created the way that it's created with this beautiful balance and this willingness to trust the process. And of course you have honed the skill, but to trust the process, to let those skills come to life with something that's so alive and speaks to you. When a person looks at your work, they melt out of the left hemispheric way of being and into the right. And of course, images do come right into the right hemisphere. You know, it's instantaneous. The image is there, it comes right in. And then we have kind of a relationship with the image that develops even further as we commune with it. So I can only encourage people with great enthusiasm to spend time with your work because it's prayerful. It's every painting is a blessing and gives you something on a very healing level. So I have to give you so much honor on that.
Thank you, Dale. I yeah, thank you for your words, and really to me it's an honor to share this work, to be able to live as an artist in this day and age, as someone who is painting from their heart. I'm not dictated by gallery or by market. I just can truly trust my inspiration to bubble through and people respond to it. Is it never I never take that for granted. And so thank you for your cheerleading. I appreciate your
I can't not. So, you know, I'm excited to share you. When you have your blank canvas, do you go in first with a, you know, a pencil or charcoal, or do you go right in with paint?
Usually right in with paint. I'll often get a little splashy on the background first. And this is something I practice when I'm teaching as well. I just encourage people to mess up that perfect white canvas. There's nothing more intimidating or more exciting than a blank canvas. There's worlds of possibility. And so get a little loose in my brushwork in the background often. And then if I do need to sketch something out, I usually work with white chalk. So that's one of the reasons as well for getting some color on the canvas is I prefer to work with white chalk because there's no ink in it or there's no dye in it. Whereas if you're working on a white canvas and you're having to use colored chalk or charcoal or Conte or something like this, it can really shift and contaminate your paint. So I just lay in some nice colors. Maybe it's in the theme of the painting that I'm working on, or maybe it's in a contrasting, like if I'm working in cools, maybe I'm going to lay in some warm colors or vice versa. And then by working with the white chalk, I really have a lot of freedom to brainstorm with the chalk because it doesn't interfere at all with the paint. So it's definitely if you're at all inclined to, especially acrylic painting, it really lends itself. This is like one of the biggest, simplest, but most empowering tools you can develop is just good old Crayola or some kids like chalk. It doesn't need to be fancy. A lot of other things like Conte, charcoal, pencil even have this sneaky way of rising to the surface of the paint with every layer, and it's really hard to cover over. It can really contaminate, and in that those lines stay. So the chalk is just so innocuous and just so lovely. And so yeah, and then I just go in from there, and I really liken it to carving. So when I'm working on a figure or an object, you start with the general to specific. So you start in with like I call it chainsaw carving, and so you just taking big chunks off or adding big chunks on, so to speak, and just building it from the very basic. If you're painting a face, remember you're painting mostly just a lumpy ball. And so remember that it's a ball and paint in those light and shadow. And then as you get into the subtleties and the details, that's when it really will come to life and the nuances will sing. But starting with that very foundational carving will really help the realism. And that's what makes it believable. That's what makes it feel like a mirror when you can stand in front of a painting. And it feels like a living being staring back at you. All of a sudden, we become that. And it teaches us about ourselves. It teaches us about aspects of ourselves or our ancestry of the world around us of different attributes and aspirations, and we can rise into that or learn from it.
You said that when you were in school, you had some amazing, we talked about your teachers of different subjects, and you said you had some amazing art teachers as well. Did you go on to more art classes? Have you studied with other people? And then you've also mentioned that, and I'm really happy to hear that you're teaching. You said that this is some of the things that you share with your students. I'm really happy you're sharing your wisdom that way. Any student that's working with you is a lucky person. So did you go to additional, you know, training art school?
I tried 1 year of art school, because that seemed like that's what you did. But it was not what I was looking for. I really just wanted to hone my skills. I didn't want to write more essays or get into the academia, and that really seemed like what it was focusing on. And to the detriment of the studio work, I really felt like there was a lack in skill development. It was just not what I was looking for.
So I have a big theater background. I've been in tons and tons of plays and musicals, and I wrote a musical theater production, but I could never tolerate theater classes or acting classes. I was like, just give
Uh-huh.
us the part. Let's just get in there and do this thing.
Yeah,
So
the role will teach you, and the paintings teach you. Like, I started dropping classes and then, taking night classes or weekend classes, just mostly life drawing is what I ended up picking up, to sort of supplement where I thought the curriculum was lacking, technically in my, you know, being whatever, 18. This is my ambition of, what I thought the art school could be. I'm sure that it benefits a lot of people. However, I also do talk to a lot of people who say that they loved painting, they loved art, they went into art college, and they never painted again. And so I actually work with some of those people. They come to my classes as like a reintroduction, dipping their toes back into the visual arts, back into painting. And what I feel like art school does typically, and every school is different, and every teacher in that school is different. So some people, like I also have friends who loved art school and they went that route and it just invigorated them and empowered them. But what I do notice is a common denominator is that it seeks to intellectualize and analyze the art to an extent that it smothers the spontaneity and inspiration. And so for some of my studio projects, if I did a painting, we were supposed to hand in color maps and thumbnail sketches and study paintings and all of these things along with it to show our planning phase. But because I've worked so intuitively for so much of my process, I would do all of those things after because I didn't want to have to overthink it. And I've actually come into a balance where a little bit of planning I do see is beneficial, especially if I'm live painting or doing something that's a little bit more on a timeline. Working with a timeline is good. I definitely find that that process of over intellectualizing, it pushes us a little bit out of our channel and says that it all needs to come from our head. So all of a sudden, our connection to inspiration, to spontaneity, to source, to the muse, to spirit is severed or bypassed. And we say, I made this. This is coming from me instead of through me. And so I feel like that's really the biggest loss in a lot of academic art institutions. And that's what I really try to encourage when people come to my workshops and retreats. I give them all the skills I can possibly give them in a very short amount of time of 4 to 10 days. I really just dump a lot of technique on them, as well as really, really encouraging the listening and encouraging the spontaneity, encouraging the faith and the unique voice that each person has, the unique relationship with the divine and with inspiration that flows through, and to really just inhabit that and take up space in that and allow your painting to be uniquely yours. While still, like if you're going for realism, let's make it real. I'll teach you those tools as well. So really that balance,
beautiful
reconnection.
metaphor once again. You're architecting your life, right? These metaphors fit perfectly for any of us, whether we are artists, whether we are in business, whether we are architecting the shape and feel and tone of our family life and our home. It's not to overanalyze and not to be too much in our heads, and to remember to be in the intuitive and to remember to be in our heart space. And it's back to that left brain is it's brilliant, it's really important, but we've got to slip across the corpus callosum and have our attention come from our right hemisphere. And these are the things that you are doing in your work and that you're sharing here. When was it in your pathway that you began to receive this amazing focus on the feminine, on the female, on the divine feminine, on the female archetypes, on these beautiful, empowering images? When did that theme start coming through you?
I think that that's always been my main focus. I've always, even as a kid, I would ask my mom constantly, Mama, what should I draw? And she'd come up with always creative ideas of a hippopotamus or a giraffe or mountains with birds flying over. And I'd say, now I'm going to draw a person. And then pretty much every time. And I would always just draw people. And so that's even as a kid and then all the way through. Figurative has been my focus because of this mirror, this relatability to the viewer. I feel like there's just so much to be learned. When there's eyes in a painting, when there's a face, this is a very, very instantaneous way to connect with the piece. And then we can go deeper really quickly. Abstract is so beautiful. I love abstract painting, and it can move you, and you can really discover a lot about yourself standing in front of like a Rothko or some big, beautiful abstract painting. However, the connection point, it can take time, it can take longer. And we can't always find our own individual mirror in that piece. It can be very emotional, but as far as like, how does this apply to me in my life in this moment is not always readily available. Or same with wildlife paintings or, scenic paintings. There's accessibility there, but it's not as personal or personally relatable. So that's why I've just always really enjoyed humans. It teaches me about myself, about humanity, about my community. And I think being a woman is what's probably catalyzed most of my paintings being of women. It's about a way of learning that femininity and that softness and power that comes with the feminine. Um, and I'm feeling more and more, as you've mentioned, there's more men coming through in my paintings, and I've known that's coming for quite a few years, and so it's beginning and then it's evolving, and I really appreciate men who are stepping up and who are really doing the beautiful work of the masculine. We, as you say, we need that so dearly. It's inseparable and vital. And so I've had men for years. I've had friends come to me and say, we need mirrors too. Can you please paint more men? And like sometimes in a very vulnerable, teary eyed, like pleading, because that beauty that can be reflected in a painting is something it's very personal. It can be very transformative. And so that's been part of my mission over the last while of just as the feelings and inspirations have come, and my husband's really helped me with that as well, of just mirroring that and being my muse and model as well sometimes, and just really meditating and exploring concepts around masculinity and how to not just subdue the masculine, not just becoming feminine, but actually like standing in strength of leadership and clarity and focus, of the beautiful ways that we need the masculine to step up. I appreciate the men who are willing to do so, that are led by their heart and willing to still build that structure.
In looking at kind of the river of human consciousness and our evolution, and I know for me, I was called to really share positive, powerful, whole, and healthy images of the feminine through the lens of archetypes so I can steer clear of religion. So it's the sacred feminine. I couldn't be more proud right now than to be serving a group of Roman Catholic nuns with my message. It's really, really satisfying to me because this sacred feminine energy runs through all of us. And we also want to see the sacred masculine. And to your point, yes, the masculine must be all of its totality, which means to be strong and which means to be protective, but heart-centered in that, which is an incredibly courageous stance to take. It's what is for the greater good, what will best protect future generations. We want men in their wholeness and their fullness as men. But the sacred masculine doesn't have that out of balance power over. It's much more power to support, power to protect, power to provide structure. And we all, of course, have masculine and feminine aspects, no matter how we identify or what bodies we're in. And we want to have that balance internally as well as externally. I am excited that you're beginning to really include more men and you're responding to the call and creating these beautiful, beautiful images.
You've mentioned a few times that art can be such a template for life. And that is something that I see at work and I put into practice, of whatever your creative process is, So, as we can step into our creative flow and really inhabit our own unique voice, we can feel into what honesty and integrity and authenticity feels like in our decision making, in our inspiration, and in the way that the art flows through us. And then we can train and attune our bodies and our hearts and our minds to what that feels like, that becomes then applicable and as a template for how to navigate life. We can use the creative process as sort of a training for how we can really listen to spirit to move through us in a very tangible way. And it'll just empower us in our decision making, even when it feels scary, even when it feels like it's going to be a lot of work or it's a little risky. Just really trusting the bigger picture, the beauty that's unfolding that we might not understand yet, but that is all part of a greater whole.
It's very inspirational to listen to you, and I'm really honored to have been able to spend this time with you. And once again, I'm incredibly honored that your work is in my work,
Mm.
in my film and in my book. I mean, that's a huge privilege. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for the invitation and for the collaboration and just for weaving this connection. I'm really also honored and grateful to you for the beautiful work you do in the world and for, yeah, being a cheerleader for beauty. Many blessings to you, Dale.
Many blessings to you. Thank you for listening to the Dale Allen Podcast. You can reach out to me regarding the book or doing a book club or the film and doing a film screening at inourrightminds.net.